The Lirathi Confederation had always believed that the galaxy was a place of harmony. It was written in their oldest archives that when one world suffered, the others would come forward to help. It was the promise of unity, the oath that bound hundreds of species together. For centuries, that faith had never been tested in full. But now, on the edge of the Confederation's borders, a small colony cried for aid. The world was called Eris 6. From orbit, it appeared beautiful, oceans of deep violet water, forests that shimmered with silver leaves, and skies that burned amber at sunset, but beauty often deceived. Beneath the surface, the planet was unstable. Shifting plates caused endless tremors. Volcanoes roared without warning. Its weather was unpredictable, scorching heat followed by bone-freezing nights, toxic winds that swept away the fragile crops, and storms so strong that whole settlements vanished overnight. The Lirathi were not a strong-bodied species. Slender, pale, and tall, they were creatures of gentle worlds. They thrived in calm climates, cultivated science, art, and peace. But when the Confederation had expanded, they had seen promise in Eris 6. Rich minerals, fertile valleys, rivers teeming with unique proteins. Colonists were sent with high hopes and advanced machines meant to tame the wild land. At first it worked. Farms sprouted, cities began to rise, and for 10 short years the colony grew. But then the balance shifted. Machines failed under constant stress. The soil, stripped too quickly, began to collapse into dust. The rivers overflowed with poisoned runoff. The skies darkened with strange particles that no one could explain. The colony governor sent the first distress call to the Confederation Council. His voice trembled but carried hope. "We request immediate assistance. Eris 6 is destabilizing. Our people cannot last without help." The signal traveled through the network of relay stations across light years until it reached the shining capital of the Confederation. There, the Council received it. They promised to review. They promised to respond. But nothing came. More signals followed, each more desperate than the last. "Our crops have failed again. We are running out of breathable reserves. The children are growing sick." Still, silence. The problem was simple but cruel. Eris 6 was considered a death world. Not by human standards, not yet, but by Confederation measure, it was already doomed. Every great power within the Council judged the planet the same way. Too costly, too dangerous, not worth saving. The colony, once a symbol of expansion, became a burden. And in politics, burdens were often left behind. On Eris 6, despair grew. Families packed what little they had, preparing for evacuation ships that never arrived. Entire districts turned to ruin. And still, the governor sent the signal, repeating it day and night. One evening in the small command hall of the colony, the leaders gathered around a dimly lit console. The air was thick with the smell of burned circuits. Even the life support systems were failing. "They will not come," whispered Vela, the chief engineer. Her silver eyes, once bright, had dulled with exhaustion. "The Confederation has written us off." Governor Sahran clenched his hands together. He was old by Lirathi standards, his frame fragile, his skin thin as paper, yet his voice carried weight. "We cannot stop sending the call. Someone must hear us. Someone will hear us." "Who?" another elder demanded bitterly. "The Ardent clans? They see us as weak. The Sarathi Dominion? They would sooner watch us fall. No one will come for us." The governor did not answer. He simply pressed the warn button once more, sending the signal out into the void. "This is Eris 6. We require assistance. Please, anyone, help us." The signal crossed endless space. Most ships ignored it. Some listened for a moment, then turned away. But one day, far beyond Confederation space, the signal reached a different kind of relay, one owned not by the delicate species of the inner worlds, but by a planet known for storms, deserts, oceans, and endless struggle. The planet was Earth. To the wider galaxy, Earth was little more than a curiosity, a late-blooming species that had entered the stars with clumsy ships and bold hearts, a world classified as a death world, a place of extremes where predators ruled, where climates shifted violently, where survival meant constant adaptation. Most civilized races wondered how humans had even made it to space at all. When the signal reached Earth's orbital station, it was flagged as low priority. But a junior officer tired from a long shift opened it out of curiosity. She listened to the trembling voice of the Lirathi governor. She replayed it twice. Then she called her superior. Within hours, the message had traveled up the chain from one department to another. Debates began. Earth's governments were divided. The Confederation had not asked humans to intervene. In fact, humans were barely trusted in the galactic community. They were too reckless, too strange. Yet as the debate dragged on, the signal kept coming. Over and over, the same plea, "Help us, please, anyone." Finally, a decision was made. Earth would respond. The message of acceptance arrived on Eris 6 at dawn. The governor was sleeping in his chair when the console flickered with new light. A voice spoke, rough, deep, and strangely warm. "This is the United Terran Response Fleet. We have received your call. Aid is on the way." "Hold fast." The governor's eyes widened. He rose unsteadily, calling for his aides. Vela arrived first, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Who was it? Did the Confederation?" "No," Sauron whispered, staring at the console. "Not them. Humans." The word rippled through the room. Humans. The Deathworlders. The reckless ones, some felt relief. Others felt fear. Stories of humans were strange and contradictory. They were said to thrive on worlds that would kill most species in days. They were adaptable, unpredictable, and unafraid of danger. But they were also clumsy compared to the great empires, lacking the advanced technology of the Confederation. Could they really help? Vela frowned. "They will not survive here. If Eris 6 defeats us, it will crush them within days." But the governor's lips curved into the faintest smile. Perhaps, or perhaps this is the kind of world they were born for. Across the stars, the humans prepared their expedition. The fleet was small, 3 ships only. The Endeavor, the Vigilant, and the Solace. They carried engineers, scientists, medics, and volunteers. Not soldiers, not conquerors. Just people who had heard a call and refused to ignore it. As the ships left Earth orbit, millions watched the broadcast. The leaders did not frame it as politics or strategy. It was something simpler. A voice echoed across every channel. When no one else responds, humanity will. On Eris 6, the days crawled by. The storms grew worse. Entire districts of the colony had to be abandoned. Still, the governor repeated the signal, though now there was an answer to believe in. One night, Vela stood on the balcony of the failing central dome. She gazed up at the chaotic sky. Somewhere out there, she knew, ships were flying toward them. Fragile ships filled with strange creatures who called themselves human. She whispered to herself, not sure if it was hope or fear. May the stars guide the Deathworlders here before it is too late. And far beyond, streaking through the dark, the humans came. For months, the people of Eris 6 had lived under constant storms. The clouds churned endlessly. Lightning split the heavens, and ash from distant volcanoes rained on the colony domes. But on that morning, the winds eased. The storm clouds parted just enough for a shaft of pale sunlight to touch the ground. Children looked upward in wonder. Farmers, who had been too weak to tend their failing fields, stepped outside their shelters for the first time in weeks. For a brief moment, hope felt real. Then the sky split open. 3 ships descended through the clouds, streaks of silver cutting across the orange sky. They were not elegant like Confederation cruisers. They were heavier, rougher in design, their hulls scarred from old journeys. Yet they held themselves steady against the fierce winds, adjusting with bursts of thrusters as though the chaos meant nothing. The largest ship landed on the broken landing field outside the Capitol dome. The ground shook as its massive legs dug into the soil. Dust and ash rose in a swirling cloud, forcing the colonists to shield their eyes. And then, for the first time in history, humans stepped onto Eris 6. They came down a ramp in groups of 5, wearing suits that looked too light for the deadly atmosphere. Their faces were visible behind transparent visors, broad cheeks, rough jaws, eyes that scanned everything with alertness. Some smiled, others looked serious, but none seemed afraid. Governor Sauron stood at the edge of the landing zone with his council. He felt small compared to the humans, though they were not all tall. Some were short, some wide, some lean. They were not uniform like most species in the Confederation. They were varied, unpredictable. The first to approach was a woman with dark hair tied back in a simple braid. She removed her helmet, inhaled the toxic air, coughed once, then laughed. "Not as bad as Mars during dust season," she said. The Lirathi Council gasped. To breathe raw air on Eris 6 was suicide. Yet the human woman seemed alive, even amused. Sauron stepped forward. His thin voice wavered. "You are the representatives from Earth?" The woman nodded. "Commander Alara Hayes, United Terran Response. These are my people." She gestured to the others. Engineers carrying bulky packs, medics with scanners, and technicians pulling carts of tools. "We are grateful," Saran whispered. "No one else." His voice trailed, overcome with emotion. Ilara's expression softened. "We heard your call." That was enough. The humans wasted no time, while the Lirathi leaders hesitated, worried about exposing their fragile bodies to the open air. The humans marched straight into the heart of the colony. They carried strange equipment, drones shaped like spheres, rugged machines that crawled on 6 wheels, and crates filled with supplies. To the colonists, it looked reckless. But to the humans, it was normal. They scanned the damaged structures, tested the poisoned soil, and tapped into the failing power grid. They took notes on scraps of paper, even though advanced tablets were available. They argued loudly with each other, throwing out ideas, disagreeing, and then laughing as if disagreement was a game. The Lirathi watched from behind their protective suits. They whispered among themselves. "They act like this world is harmless. Are they immune to fear? They are strange, but perhaps that is what we need." By the second day, the humans had set up camp outside the main dome. Unlike the Lirathi, who had built delicate shelters reinforced with energy fields, the humans used thick cloth tents, metal frames, and heaters that hissed against the cold nights. Their camp looked temporary, almost crude, but it was warm, busy, and alive. Children of the colony were the first to approach. At first, their parents tried to hold them back, but curiosity was stronger than fear. The children wandered to the human camp and stared at the strangers with wide eyes. One of the humans, a tall man with sandy hair, noticed them. He grinned and waved them over. From his pack, he pulled out a small device, a simple drone shaped like a bird. He tossed it into the air, and it fluttered with bright lights, swooping around the children before landing gently on a girl's shoulder. The girl gasped in delight. Her parents, watching from afar, were stunned. That evening, the story spread. The humans play with our children without fear. For the first time in months, laughter echoed through the colony. The real work began on the third day. Commander Ilara called a meeting in the central dome. The Lirathi leaders gathered, expecting a long, formal presentation with technical charts. Instead, the humans laid out a map of the colony on a rough cloth and began pointing with their fingers. "This soil is collapsing because you're forcing it to grow too fast," one engineer explained. "We'll use microbial stabilizers. They'll survive where your crops won't." "These vents are building pressure," another said, tapping the volcanic regions. "You tried to seal them. That's why the earthquakes got worse. We'll redirect them, use the energy for power." The Lirathi leaders were shocked. "Redirect the volcanoes? Harness the storms? That is madness." The humans exchanged amused glances. "On Earth, we call it Monday." At first, the colony resisted. The Lirathi engineers insisted on using safe, proven methods. Delicate machines, controlled systems, balanced equations. But again and again, their methods had failed. The humans worked differently. They were not afraid to get dirty. They waded into toxic rivers with only basic filters. They dug trenches by hand when machines broke down. They used ropes, pulleys, and stubborn determination instead of waiting for perfect tools. What shocked the Lirathi most was the way humans treated failure. When a device collapsed or an experiment failed, they did not despair. They laughed, cursed lightly, and tried again. For them, failure was not the end. It was the process. Soon some Lirathi youths began to copy them. They joined the humans in digging, testing, and experimenting. Their elders protested at first, but the results were undeniable. Progress was being made. One evening, Governor Sauron visited the human camp. He found Commander Ilara sitting by a portable heater, writing notes in a thick journal. The governor studied her quietly. "You are not afraid of this world," he said at last. Ilara looked up, smiling faintly. "We're from Earth, Governor. Our world taught us that life doesn't wait for perfect conditions. You survive by adapting, or you don't survive at all." Sauron tilted his head. "But why come here? Why risk your lives for strangers?" The human commander closed her journal and leaned back. For a moment, her eyes softened with memory. "Because once we called for help too, and no one came. We decided after that we would not let others feel the same silence." The governor bowed his head. For the first time since the crisis began, his heart felt lighter. By the end of the first week, signs of change appeared. The soil near the colony began to stabilize with the help of human microbes. The redirected vents lessened the tremors. For the first time in months, crops showed green shoots. The Lirathi could hardly believe it. What their most advanced technology had failed to do, the humans had begun to fix with grit, creativity, and what seemed like madness. Whispers spread across the colony. Whispers turned to stories, and stories grew into something more. "They are Deathworlders," one colonist said. "This planet cannot defeat them." "No," another replied with awe. "Perhaps this planet is exactly what they were made for." And as the humans worked under the chaotic skies of Era 6, the Confederation watched from afar. Reports of their progress reached the capital. Many were skeptical. Some mocked. But others grew uneasy. If humans could survive where no one else could? What did that mean for the balance of the galaxy? The humans, unaware of the whispers, kept working. To them it was simple. Someone had asked for help. They had answered. And as the storms of Era 6 raged on, the impossible began to look possible. Every day the sky twisted itself into new shapes, boiling with thunder and fire. The colonists had long believed that no one could master such chaos. Yet the humans moved inside it as if they belonged. By the third week of their arrival, they had mapped the land in ways no Lirathi had dared. Their drones flew into volcanic vents. Their rovers crawled across poisoned fields. And their engineers walked through storms with nothing but cloth masks and stubborn courage. The Lirathi Council met often in secret, watching the reports that humans sent back. The governor, Saran, listened quietly as his engineers debated. "This is madness," said one elder. "To redirect volcanic energy? To guide storms instead of shielding from them? It is reckless." And yet, Vela, the colony's chief engineer, countered. "They make progress. Their methods work where ours have failed. Can you deny what we see with our own eyes?" The room grew silent. No one could. One morning, Commander Alara Hayes called for a meeting in the colony's central dome. She arrived with her team, bringing maps and strange models built from scrap metal. The council waited tense as she placed the models on the table. "This," she began, pointing to a crude structure shaped like a funnel, "is what you built around the volcanic vents. You tried to seal them to trap the pressure underground. That's why your earthquakes worsened." Saran leaned forward. "You suggest leaving them open?" "Not leaving them," Alara said with a small smile. "Redirecting them. Think of the vents not as enemies but as tools. You tried to cage them. We'll give them a path. Channels, turbines, heat exchangers. Instead of destroying you, the volcanoes will power your cities." Gasps filled the room. One elder shook his head violently. "Harness volcanoes? Impossible," Alara shrugged. "On Earth, we heat entire nations with geothermal power. We do not fight the fire beneath our feet. We work with it." She tapped another model, this one shaped like tall, curved towers. "And here, the storms. Your people hide from them, waste power on endless shields. We propose wind harvesters. Not fragile machines, but simple structures. Towers built strong like sails that bend with the storm instead of breaking. With them, you won't just survive the winds. You'll feed on their energy." The Lirathi Council was stunned into silence. Finally, Governor Saran asked softly, "You mean to say, what destroys us could also save us?" Alara met his eyes. "Yes, that is the unthinkable solution. Stop fighting the world. Let it fight for you." At first, the colonists resisted. The very idea of living with Era 6 seemed like heresy. For decades, they had dreamed of taming the world, bending it into peace. To give up that dream felt like defeat. But the humans worked anyway. They began near the volcanic ridge where steam poured from the ground like angry breath. Lirathi engineers trembled as they approached, their suits hissing under the heat. But the humans laughed, stripped down their heavier gear, and dug trenches through the blackened soil. "Don't fight the vent," one human explained to his Lirathi partner. "Guide it. Think of it like a river. A dangerous one, sure, but rivers can irrigate, carry, and give life if you learn to use them." The Lirathi had no words. To them, volcanoes were symbols of death. To humans, they were simply resources waiting to be used. Weeks passed. Slowly, the new structures rose. Thick pipes carried the heat of the vents into turbines that hummed with power. Tall towers bent gracefully in the storm winds, turning chaos into steady current. The colony lights, once dim and failing, grew bright again. The heaters worked without fear of collapse. For the first time in many months, the people of Era 6 slept without shivering. And the crops began to grow again. The humans had brought with them hardy seeds, ones bred to survive in thin soil and harsh weather. They knelt in the dirt with the Lirathi children, showing them how to plant, how to care for the small green shoots. They did not treat farming as a desperate act, but as a game, a challenge to be enjoyed. The children laughed as the humans told stories of Earth's deserts, jungles, and mountains. When the first harvest appeared, small but real, there were tears across the colony. People who had not smiled in months gathered in the fields, touching the leaves with trembling hands. "We live again," someone whispered, "because of them." But not everyone was pleased. From the capital of the Confederation, rumors spread. Reports of the humans' progress reached the highest council chambers. Some species were shocked, others offended. They should not be there, one ambassador snapped. The colony was a failure. It should have been abandoned. Yet the humans succeed, another replied uneasily. "That is the danger," said a third. "If the Deathworlders prove they can thrive where we cannot." What does that say about us? Whispers spread of banning humans from further intervention. Some feared that their reckless methods would destabilize the balance of power. Others feared something simpler, that the galaxy would look to humans, not the great empires in times of need. But on Era 6, none of that mattered. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon in a blaze of amber light, Governor Saran walked to the human camp. He found Alara standing atop a newly built turbine tower, her hair whipping in the storm wind. "You are changing everything," Saran said as she climbed down. Alara raised an eyebrow. "Is that a complaint, Governor?" He shook his head slowly. "It is wonder. For years we saw this planet as our enemy. You saw it as a partner," Alara shrugged. "It's the only way we know. Earth is a hard teacher. It taught us that survival isn't about control. It's about balance." Saran looked at her for a long time. Then he asked, "Will it last? Will your solutions hold?" Alara's smile was steady, but her words were honest. "They'll hold as long as you keep adapting. This planet will keep changing. That's what it does. But now you know how to change with it." The governor returned to his council with a new idea. "We must stop calling Era 6 a curse. With the help of the humans, we can make it our ally." At first, many resisted, but the proof was all around them. Bright lights, growing crops, steady heat. The unthinkable solution was no longer just theory. It was life. And slowly, the colony began to believe. One night, Vela, the chief engineer, sat with one of the human technicians by the edge of a vent. The ground rumbled beneath them, hot steam rising into the dark sky. "It still frightens me," she admitted softly. "This planet, these forces, they are beyond our control." The human smiled, tossing a small stone into the vent's glow. "They frighten us too. But that's the point. Fear isn't something you escape. It's something you learn to live with. Fear keeps you alive, and sometimes it teaches you how to do the impossible." Vela thought about those words for a long time. As the colony transformed, so did its people. The children played freely in the fields. The farmers sang as they worked. The scientists studied the storms not with dread, but with curiosity. And through it all, the humans walked among them, laughing, working, sharing simple meals and simple stories. The Lirathi began to see them not as strange outsiders, but as companions. Odd. Reckless companions, yes, but true friends. And for the first time since the first distress call, Era 6 no longer felt like a place of despair. It felt like home again. Yet beyond the planet, forces stirred. The Confederation could not ignore the whispers forever. Already ships of other species were moving closer, watching the humans with wary eyes. Already debates raged in the council halls, but for now, on the wild soil of Era 6 there was peace. And as the wind howled against the towers and the vents glowed with hidden fire, one truth became clear. The Deathworlders had done the unthinkable. Where once there had been dim halls and broken machines, now there were bright lights powered by volcanic energy. Where there had been barren fields, now there were crops swaying in the wind. The storm still raged, the ground still shook, but the people no longer cowered. They stood taller. They worked with steady hands. They laughed again, and everywhere in the colony, one truth spread from voice to voice. The humans came when no one else did. The Confederation could not ignore this forever. From the capital world, messages were sent. At first, they were polite requests for progress reports. Later, they became colder. Demands, orders, questions of authority. Who gave Earth the right to intervene? Some ambassadors demanded. They are an untested species. Their presence is reckless. They will destabilize the balance of our alliances. But when images of Eris 6 reached the council chambers, images of children laughing under storm towers, of crops growing beside geothermal pipes, of colonists smiling with humans at their side, the arguments grew weaker. The people of the Confederation whispered to one another, why did no one else respond? Why only them? On Eris 6 itself, life moved forward. Commander Alara Hayes and her team did not live as guests in shining halls. They worked side by side with the colonists. Their clothes grew dirty, their hands blistered, their laughter echoed through the same markets and fields as everyone else. The Lirathi began to copy human habits. Children played games that humans had taught them, running and chasing, building small forts out of scrap. Farmers tried planting earth seeds alongside their own, surprised to see them thrive. Even the engineers adopted human sayings, phrases like trial and error, or back to the drawing board. At first, these habits felt strange, but slowly they became part of the colony itself. One evening, Governor Saran visited the human camp. The air was filled with the smell of cooked food, simple meals of grains and roasted vegetables. Humans and Lirathi sat together, passing plates, telling stories under the dim glow of lamps. Saran sat beside Alara, watching quietly. After a time he spoke, my people are alive because of you. There are no words that can carry such thanks. Alara smiled faintly. You don't owe us thanks, Governor. We only did what anyone should have done. Yet no one else did, Saran whispered. Alara looked at him, her eyes steady. Then let this be proof. Sometimes the smallest voice can still be heard, and sometimes the ones you least expect are the ones who answer. Saran bowed his head. The Confederation may never forgive you for making them look weak, but we will never forget. As the weeks turned into months, the colony stabilized. The geothermal plants produced steady energy. The wind towers bent and turned gracefully in the endless storms. The fields produced enough food to feed the people. Children grew healthier. Families rebuilt their homes, and songs returned to the markets. For the first time in years, the colony had a future, and in every corner the humans were there, not as rulers, not as saviors, but as partners, far away. The debates in the Confederation grew louder. Some leaders argued that Earth had overstepped its place. Others said Earth had proved its value. A few even whispered that the Confederation needed humans more than it wanted to admit. Reports came of struggling colonies in other sectors. Quietly, their governors began to send signals, not to the Council, but to Earth, and quietly Earth began to answer. On Eris 6, the colonists gathered one last time in the central dome to mark the turning of a new year. It was a simple celebration: music, shared food, laughter. The storm winds howled outside, but inside there was warmth. Governor Saran stood to speak, his frail frame steadied by Vela at his side. His voice, though thin, carried across the hall. We were abandoned, he said simply. We were forgotten. But when no one else responded, the Deathworlders came. And they did not see a dying world. They saw a challenge. They saw life. They saw us. He paused, letting the words sink in. The hall was utterly silent. Let this day be remembered. Let it be said that when others turned away, the humans stood beside us. Not as conquerors, not as masters, but as friends. The colonists rose in applause, not polite clapping, but thunderous. Heartfelt applause that filled the dome until it seemed the very walls shook. The humans, scattered among the crowd, looked almost embarrassed, but their smiles were wide. Later that night, Alara stood alone on a balcony, gazing at the storm-swept sky. Vela joined her, silent for a while before speaking. They will tell stories about you, Vela said. Alara shook her head. Not about me. About all of us. About what happens when people refuse to let others be forgotten. Vela studied her carefully. Do you think you will stay? Alara was quiet for a moment, then sighed. Humans never stay in one place for long. There are other calls. Other signals. Someone else out there will need us. Vela lowered her gaze, sadness in her eyes, but also respect. Then may the stars guide you to them. Alara smiled faintly. And may the storms guide you here. Weeks later, the human ships prepared to depart. The entire colony gathered at the landing field to see them off. Children waved flags stitched from scraps. Families carried baskets of food as gifts. and the governor himself stood tall despite his frailty. As the humans boarded their ships, cheers echoed through the valley. One child, a girl who had once stood on the edge of the human camp, watching them with fearful eyes, ran forward and pressed a small carved figure into Alara's hand. It was a simple carving of a tower bending in the wind. "For you?" the girl whispered shyly. "So you remember us?" Alara crouched, touched by the gesture. "I will," she promised. When the ships lifted into the sky, the colonists watched until they were gone. Some wept, some smiled, but all felt the same truth. They had been saved not by the strongest empire, nor the wealthiest council, but by those who knew what it meant to be left behind. Far across the stars, new distress signals were sent, some faint, some desperate, and though the great powers still argued in their chambers, Earth listened, and when no one else responded, the Deathworlders came,